today let's chat about eating like a man. The reason why I bring this up is because about 90% of all the men that I train do not eat enough. And let's get into the reasons why that is a problem today on the podcast. All right. So did a little post this week about 90% of the men that I coach undereat. And this is a recurring theme, and I wanted to nip it in the bud as best as I can. Having been down that road myself, it sucks because the big paradigm that I guess convinces most guys that they need to eat less is the eat less, do more paradigm, which has essentially come out of the 1970s. If you go back to the history of why we're following this weird paradigm, most people have no idea why we do the things we do. They just do the things we do because that's the way we've always done it. When in actuality, these concepts, these paradigms, were not actually based on really good science. So to kind of gloss over the history of this, in the 70s in the United States, they essentially developed the food pyramids. First time in history that politicians got involved with what we eat at home. The food pyramid was essentially created and lobbied for so that you had a big base of the pyramid that had grains, and then you went up to the top and they didn't want you to eat fat. So essentially, you get the point, right? You're consuming a lot of grains. You know, the United States, Canada produced a lot of wheat, a lot of corn. And what that did was allowed for a lot of profits to be made. There was a big incentive to make sure that people got those foods into them. Not only that, back, I believe it was President Eisenhower. Yes. Or was it President Truman? Anyways, don't quote me on that. But back in the 50s, the president he had heart trouble. And Ansel Keys, who was a researcher, ascertained that it was increasing consumption of saturated fat. And that developed the diet heart hypothesis. If you want to get a better understanding and hear it from the horse's mouth, go to the episode I did with Philip Ovadia. Now, I did 2 episodes of Dr. Philip Ovadia. He's a cardiac surgeon in the States. And he explains it a lot better. But essentially what happened was a hypothesis was created around the consumption of red meat and saturated fat, which was contributing to coronary heart disease. So the idea behind reducing the amount of fat in your diet was based around research that was done by Ansel Keys, who looked at different populations around the world and said, aha, I've got the hypothesis here. It's too much saturated fat, and there's a lot of saturated fat in meat, so therefore meat's bad, butter's bad. Anything that's fatty is bad. Get it out of your diet and consume less of it. So what that led to was essentially what we saw in the 1970s, which was the food pyramid, which had a massive focus on carbohydrates. Now, a human body is a human body. So we need our calories, and we'll seek it out the best way we can. If you're not consuming fat and you're not consuming a lot of protein, well, you're going to be hungry, and the incentive for your body to go out and find it is going to be kind of short-circuited because you were told, don't do it, your heart's going to explode. So you're going to find calories, and if all you have is processed, refined carbohydrates, you're going to eat those. And now we've seen the consequences. 88% of North Americans are metabolically broken. That is unacceptable. Obviously, the paradigm is broken, and I've softened a lot on those that are obese because before my attitude was pretty hardline, like a typical infantry NCO, like, you know, you better not be fat and walking into my section or my platoon because you're not combat effective. And so I always took that very seriously. And if you were fat or overweight and weren't taking care, I just chalked it up to you being lazy and you being incapable of managing your shit. That was unsat. Now I've softened a little bit in my older age because I've talked to some really interesting people, some really smart people, I've read some interesting books. If you read The Obesity Code by Dr. Fung, you'll get a much better perspective as to why so many people are obese and fat. And it's not that individuals don't try aggressively to lose weight. They do. Everybody I've talked to has tried to lose weight. I've, struggled with it as well. And until I changed the model and actually got the right model that works with our biochemistry, I was constantly fluctuating and getting frustrated with myself. And that is what we're going to be talking about. How do we ensure that we end up with the right working model and not the wrong working model, which basically everybody on the planet is using right now? So the proof is in the pudding. If we keep on going down the same path and doing the same thing over and over again, so about for the last 50 years, look what happens. Childhood obesity is at above 20%, I believe, which is unbelievable. You're basically handing your kids a death sentence. Like I said before, 88% of us are metabolically broken, meaning we have at least one factor of 4 factors that aren't tracking in the right direction. So we either have high triglycerides, prediabetes, high blood pressure, or obesity. If you have any one of those 4, you're considered metabolically unhealthy. And as we are getting a much better picture as to longevity and long-term health, if you are metabolically unhealthy, you are going to be unhealthy, period. And that leads to a whole wealth of disease. Diabetes, Alzheimer's, you name it. Like being incapable of fighting off infections. These are all things that are a cascade effect from being metabolically broken. How did we get here? Well, the one thing I want to focus on today is just our inability to actually understand what food is. We were stripped from the concept of food being nourishing to a very scientific, very cold, very engineered like idea that food is fuel and a calorie is a calorie is a calorie, which is completely irresponsible. We are not machines. We have a very complicated and complex biochemistry that we must respect. When you put fuel in a car, that is a man-made machine. The laws of thermodynamics apply. If you put in 50 liters of fuel, you will get the equivalent in energy transferred to the wheels to move the car forward. Okay? When you put in, let's say, 500 calories of food, it really depends on what food you're putting into your body. It's not like 500 calories of steak is the same as 500 calories of candy. I think we can understand that on a fundamental level. But what you've been told and what you most likely believe is the complete opposite. Oh, I need to reduce my calories because the calories that matter. The calories are king. And this is the line in the sand. They are not. They are not. You have some cognitive dissonance. If you eat 500 calories, let's say, of broccoli, do you genuinely think that you would get fat from 500 calories of broccoli? And I'm guessing you think no. If you eat 500 calories of, let's go to the next item on the list, 500 calories of, let's say, potatoes, would you get fat? Potentially. 500 calories of steak, would you potentially get fat? Now, that's where we start kind of, well, there's saturated fat in there, so maybe, yeah. So you can see the lines start getting blurred. So this is the main reason why, especially men, stop eating enough. Because they want to get that shredded look. They want to be lean. Most of us want to look good. We want to look good for our wives, our girlfriends. We want to look good in front of our buddies. We don't want to look doughy. We don't want to look like we're unfit. Like, at a fundamental level, there's an ego there that needs to be stroked. Like, hey, dude, you're looking freaking good, man. And on top of that, there's the whole being fit to fight, and you want to be able to look relatively imposing. There's a whole caveman side of our brains as well. Like, we don't want to be taken for pushovers, and especially if you're ex-military, right? We've got that aggressiveness that is important for us to progress in life. Looking doughy and looking soft not only sends the wrong message, it also affects our morale. So if you're constantly undercutting your calories in hopes that you'll get that look and it's never occurring, well, there's a reason why. And let's get into it. So at a fundamental level, you likely cut out fat and protein as a means to reduce your calories. Now, calories that come from fat are pretty dense. So you're getting 9 calories per gram of fat, whereas opposed to carbohydrates and protein, you get about 4 calories, right? So the way I like to break things down is that you need to always prioritize your protein first. And the reason why you need to prioritize your protein first is because, well, protein breaks down to amino acids. Amino acids are the building blocks of all your cells and are required to rebuild your muscle cells stronger after you train. Hence the reason why bodybuilders really focus on protein. If you have adequate protein levels at a bare minimum, okay, you're going to be doing okay. You're going to be doing all right. Now, what type of protein? I won't even get into that at this level, but there's certain amino acids, there's essential amino acids that you absolutely need to eat in order to survive. Those are the ones that we cannot synthesize biochemically. So something like a steak is a complete protein. It's got all the essential amino acids, so you don't have to think about it. If you are a vegetarian or a vegan, that's where you run into some issues because you're not getting all your essential amino acids without mixing and matching, combining a bunch of different things. Anyways, that's a conversation for another day. The next thing is on the list is fat. So what sources of fat are you getting into your diet? You need to have fat in your diet. Point final. Because there are essential fatty acids. When you consume fat, it turns into essential fatty acids. These are the building blocks for most of your hormones. And the main one for dudes is testosterone. If you don't consume the fatty acids, if those aren't part of your regular staple, you're going to have a hard time synthesizing your sex hormone, which is testosterone. Therefore, you start running into a cascade of problems. Not enough protein, you can't rebuild muscle tissue or cells for that matter. Not enough fat, you can't synthesize hormones. Okay, now you're in disease, okay? Now you're incapable of running the machine, if we want to call it, the human body effectively. So you're going to start falling into maybe the metabolically broken category. Not only that, protein has a thermogenic effect. When you consume protein, if you've ever heard of the meat sweats, you've had a big night of crushing steaks, it is a real thing. Protein requires your metabolism to increase in order to break it down. So therefore, your body temperature rises a little bit, and therefore, you're burning a little bit more calories in order to consume that protein, which is a good thing. So you combine the protein with the thermogenic effect with the added muscle mass. Muscle mass is a lot more energy hungry, and that's a good thing. If your body requires more energy to keep that muscle mass on, well, the bro science around, well, I need to constantly eat in order to keep muscle mass on is not true. A lot of this came out of the Schwarzenegger era. If you're a bodybuilder, if you're trying to get as big as humanly possible, yes, you need to eat a lot. Like, you need to be constantly storing. So insulin needs to be high. But likely you're not. So you don't need to eat all the time. I use Dr. Jason Fung's analogy all the time. If you built a log cabin and winter's coming, and all of a sudden you need to heat the log cabin, you don't start chopping up your furniture, which in this case would be like the muscle cells, in order to keep your cabin warm. You don't start breaking down your log cabin. That doesn't make any sense. You would go collect wood, which is analogous to fat, and then you throw it on the fire, and then it burns. So that's essentially what we want. When you burn fat, so when fat cells get converted and then can be used as energy, that is our ideal situation, okay? So with that being said, if you are under eating, if you do not have enough calories in your diet, you're likely getting too little protein and too little fat, okay, at a fundamental level. Your carbohydrates are probably bang on, but there's no such thing as an essential carbohydrate. You do not need, at a fundamental biochemical level, any carbohydrates. I know this might blow your mind a little bit, but if you went the rest of your life not consuming a single gram of carbohydrate, you would be 100% okay. The proof of this is if you read about Ernest Shackleton, who I'm a really big fan of. His book is incredible about, he didn't write it, but about his expedition to the Antarctic. His crew got marooned on an island because their ship got crushed in the ice, and they were incapable of getting any other food except for penguin meat. Penguin is extremely greasy, and there's like 0 carbohydrates in it. So they were able to survive off that. Additionally, if you look at Angus Barbieri, He's the record holder for the longest fast in human history. He did, I think, 385 days of not eating a single calorie and just drank water. And he went from 400 and something pounds to 180 pounds. That's obviously a massive, impressive feat for any human being to do. But it just goes to show that there are certain beliefs that we may have around food that are not true. So increasing your caloric intake is not necessarily going to increase your body mass. What it will do is put you in a healthy state. So the question is, how do you know if you're eating enough? So you just need to follow some basic guidelines. So the basic guidelines are this. I use the fist, palm, thumb method. So your fists, your palm, and your thumb. So-called FPT. And the reason why I use this is because ultimately, if you're not required to be hyper vigilant on every, let's say, macronutrient you put in, you're trying to get a habit of eating properly and understanding, hey, what should my plate look like every time I eat? This is the easiest long-term solution. And once you get it down pat, you're good to go. You don't need to break out scales. You don't need to break out anything like that. So essentially, it's scalable literally to you because you're using your own hands. Your hands are, relative to how big you are. So if you look at the fact that, a palm of protein, which is, this size for me, it needs to be about 1.5 inches thick. Okay, that's one serving. Every man should be having 2 servings of protein for every meal times 3. So that's at a baseline level. I don't care if you're, training more, whatever, at a baseline level, this is what you need to have. So roughly that's going to translate into about 120 grams of protein, because roughly you're getting about 40 grams of protein in total per meal. So about 20 grams per palm of protein. Okay, so that's where you start. If you go look at what you're eating right now and just do an audit, do a food journal, and this is what I do with my athletes, oftentimes they'll look at their food and they're like, oh crap, like I only had maybe like 2 servings of protein all day. That puts things in perspective, like, oh man, I'm really not eating enough. And now what happens is your body ends up getting used to not eating a lot. So it turns its metabolism down. Your body is beautifully designed, if you want to call it design, to allow you to survive long periods without food, sometimes without a little bit of water. It's an efficient freaking killing machine. We are meant to go hunt for days. So if there's not a lot of food, guess what? It turns the metabolism down a little bit. So it goes, all right, I don't know about this, so let's turn it down a bit. Well, if you do that constantly, it's going to say, well, this is my steady state. It's homeostasis. It gets into a steady state and wants to stick there. You need to jam in more protein and food to start cranking that metabolism up, because it says, oh, there's more food. Oh, okay, cool. Well, what do I do with this? Well, I can store a bit of it, and I guess I got to use some of it. Okay, let's fire up the engines and let's get all systems at 100%. So cognitively, you might start thinking better. You might actually start losing body fat. You might actually start keeping or building muscle mass. That's how you know that, hey, I might have been eating way too little. And surprisingly, if you focus on improving the amount of protein you put in your body, you won't gain body fat, and you might start actually losing weight, believe it or not. But ultimately, you'll start feeling better. So you'd have to just track along, a week or two. Hey, how do I feel? Do I feel better? Okay, cool. Well, I guess that's working. Then layer in your fat. Use your thumb. And every meal, you need to have 2 thumbs of fat. So essentially, you can use nuts, like if you're using almonds. You just line up the almonds along your thumb, and that's a serving. So you don't need very much, So that's about like 12 almonds, not even, maybe around there. And essentially, that's a tablespoon of olive oil in total, which would be your serving. And that's really easy to get. You can put it on your salad, you can put on anything and get that extra bump. It could be peanut butter, like natural peanut butter. You can put that in and you can get the added increase. So I had this chat actually today, or this week I should say, with a few of the people in the Hard to Kill community. One of them was Rob, who we've got a little friendly competition going on in the Facebook group, where it's the first to 405 pound deadlift. And Rob's a bit older than me, but we're both old timers, so to speak. And the thing that changed the most, having spoken to him, he's like, man, I just I just realized I need to eat more. And with his coach basically said, like, you're not going to get stronger and fitter until you start eating more. And you're going to allow yourself to recover better. And because of that, you're going to be able to perform better. All right. So because of that, he's able to start doing some solid lifts, like well into the 300s, right? And you can check out the videos. They're pretty awesome in the Facebook group. And then chatting with one of my athletes, Dave, who's a police officer. Shout out to Dave, who's going for his first 5K run, first 5K competition, I should say, literally today, because he feels freaking awesome. However, he's noticed after cutting out junk food and cutting out snacks, his caloric intake has dropped quite a bit. Okay, so now the plan is, all right, we gotta substitute those calories that you're putting in that were empty calories with good protein and good fat. So we're starting to track in the right direction. That's exactly what you need to start doing as well if you're not already doing it. Start putting in the good protein, start putting in the good fat, and start using your hands as a way to guide yourself into proper nutrition. Because if you're not taking care, like if you're not paying the farm now, in the sense that, you know, you spend a little bit of extra money at your local farmer to get some good food on your table every day, you're going to pay the farm later, which is big pharma. And I got no love for those guys. Those guys are just money hungry pill pushers. Don't fall prey to their marketing strategy. You are not just a bunch of unlinked symptoms. You are a human machine built to kick ass, take names, but you need to start taking care of yourself and putting in the right foods into your body so that you can actually thrive. All right. So in summary, start eating more. You're likely not. You need to start with adding in more protein, and you do that by using your palms. A man needs 2 palms of protein per meal, and that's 3 meals a day. All right. Ladies, it's half of that. It's 1 palm. You need to also put in 2 thumbs of good fat. And when I say good fat, I mean natural fat that is like an olive oil, like a coconut oil, nothing that's processed from seeds like canola oil, rapeseed oil, any of those vegetable oils. We want to try to avoid those, and I won't get into the reasons why just now, but try to pull back on that. And once you do that, you'll increase the number of calories, but also the nutrient density that you're consuming. After a week, if you start doing this, I guarantee you're going to feel better. Like, it's guaranteed. And if you can hold the line, maintain the discipline, and start consuming that on a regular basis, you will have taken a bite out of chronic disease for the future. So you'll be looking out for yourself, but you'll be looking out for your loved ones as well, because you'll be fitter, you'll be healthier, and you'll be able to take charge, kick ass, take names a hell of a lot better that way. Okay. If you want more info, if you want to dive a little bit deeper, I'm always open for a chat, especially in the Facebook group. Drop me a message or drop me a comment by tagging me, and we'll definitely get into this conversation a lot more. So folks, thanks again for tuning in. Wanted to go over this important topic a little bit deeper today. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to either the YouTube channel here or on your favorite podcast app. That would be much appreciated. And take a screenshot, put it on your stories, post it on Facebook, use the hashtag hard to kill, HRD number 2 KILL, and share with as many people as possible, right? We're trying to fix and solve the health issues in the veteran and sheepdog community, one veteran and first responder at a time. And we can only do it with your help by spreading the word. All right. Love you all. Don't forget, train hard, fight easy. Peace.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. You can find out more about training, nutrition, and mindset at davemorrow.net. Be sure to like us on Facebook and Instagram at Dave Morrow PT. And don't forget, strong people are hard to kill.